Welcome to Into the Words, a podcast from the Highlights Foundation Retreat Center. Today in the cabin, we have our dear friends, Christine Heppermann and Deb Kovacs. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb, greetings. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about you. Introduce yourself.
Okay. I am part of an imprint called Walden Pond Press, which is a middle grade imprint at HarperCollins. It's a joint venture between HarperCollins and Walden Media, which is a film studio that makes a lot of movies based on children's books. And I come to that work through a long career of interacting with children's media and children's publishing from various perspectives, as a writer, as an editor, as a developer of content for schools. So broadly, I try to spend my career connecting kids and books and writers and teachers together.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Christine.
Hello.
Hi. Tell us about you.
I am the author of a YA poetry collection called Poisoned Apples, Poems for You, My Pretty. I have a novel in verse called Ask Me How I Got Here. An upcoming novel in verse in 2020 called What Goes Up. These are all from Green Willow, an imprint of HarperCollins. And I am the young adult book reviewer for the Chicago Tribune newspaper. I kind of came up to writing through reviewing. So I've been a reviewer for the Hornbook magazine, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, you name it, I've reviewed for it at some point in the past. And I came to reviewing. I have a master's in children's literature from Simmons College. So I've kind of been steeped, and I've been a children's bookseller. So even though, I'm primarily a writer now, I've come at it from all different angles, from lots of different angles.
So, how many books are you reading in a week or a month?
Pretty much every day I get a package on my doorstep of ARCs, of advanced reading copies. Usually I read, the reviews I do are kind of like a roundup of 3 books, like every 6 weeks or so. It's hard to say. I'm always dipping into books, probably books that I, completely read. I don't know, a dozen maybe? It fluctuates all the time, depending on whether or not I'm cramming for a deadline.
Neat. Okay. Well, what brings you to the Highlights Foundation this week is the Writing the Unreal workshop. Christine, you've been a part of it for a while. Will you explain a little bit?
I have. We started in 2010 when I was fortunate enough to have Ann Ursu, one of the faculty members, invite me to be the teaching assistant. And I think there was a whole novel workshop here previously that was, just more general, and people who wanted to concentrate on fantasy. Sometimes it's hard for people who don't read fantasy. They kind of have a mental block about it, or people who think, I don't understand fantasy, even though a lot of the craft elements are the same. I mean, you have to have developed characters, plot, theme, all these things. So I think fantasy writers, it's good to have a place where everybody understands you and believes in themselves that they understand fantasy. And so, this is our 10-year anniversary of doing this. And we've gone from doing it once a year to doing it twice a year in May and October. And it's just a joy. I mean, we have great groups of people every time who go on from here and lots of times stay connected and share work back and forth. And we've had repeat customers who come back with different novels. They have one novel they worked on one year and they have a new one and they come back, and alum that come back to do unworkshops and just happen to come back at the same time we're doing the whole novel workshop. And so, come in and give a talk about what it's like to go out in the world after you finish your revisions here. So it's just an amazing experience.
Talk a little bit about the format. People submit a novel.
Sure, right. So you submit your whole manuscript, and we have 8 participants and 2 faculty, Ann Ursu and Laura Ruby, and Laura reads 4 and Ann reads 4 entire novels and then sends back a detailed critique letter. And then the participants all send out up to 15 pages of the work for a workshop that we have when we're here, and so I'm the leader of that writing workshop. So the format is you come to you have meetings with Anne and Laura at some point, and then you have like the first half of the day each day to write, and then we get together for a writing workshop in the afternoon. And it's not just like here's the piece and here's what it needs. It's that, but it's also like general discussions of craft, and we use those pieces as springboards to discuss elements of craft that are going to help everyone, not just the individual writer.
And Deb, you came for 2 or 3 days. And
Yeah.
talk about your part of
I'm
the
trying to remember
workshop.
how long I've been doing. I think maybe 5 or 6. It seems like a long time.
Yeah.
I know, long. Not the whole time
Not
for
the-
sure, but for a while. At some point, these three thought it might be good to have a voice from the publishing world. But I'm in a sort of an interesting position. I am very involved actively in acquisitions, but I'm not a hands-on editor. But I'm very involved in the process, and also having been a writer myself, I think what I do when I come here is I meet one-on-one with each of the members of the group, having read the 15-page work, so I have a taste of the work, and I speak with Anne and Laura and Christine about what's going on with this writer, so that my conversation with them is additive rather than something out of left field, pretty much. And then I meet with each of them for about 45 minutes or an hour, and it's a pretty open conversation. I leave it open to them to either come to me with questions or seek response from me. And it's every conversation is completely different. And my only preparation ahead of time is I come willing to listen to them or willing to speak to them and just listen to see what they want. My intention is to encourage them to leave here very motivated to continue writing. So that's one of the things I look for the most in these conversations is there something blocking that individual that I can help relax, kind of, and it goes along with what they're already doing, but it's sort of a separate conversation, but it's intended to be in support of what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think support for you is a good word, because you help people figure out how to support their writing, emotionally and psychologically,
Right.
but also practically, since
Right.
you've had different experience doing a bunch of different jobs related to children's literature. So
Yeah.
if someone, needs to pay the bills to support their writing,
Yeah.
you have great ideas about, different things, practical things that they can do to
so I'm a bit of a strategist.
bring in the bucks.
Yeah, but I also, in some instances, some authors really want to talk more about their work with another person who's also thought about it.
Right.
And I participate in the work. When I'm here, I participate in the afternoon workshops as well. So I'm just one of the group in that case. But then when I'm talking one-to-one, we might go in farther into the piece, and they will reflect with me on conversations they're having with Laura and Anne, and we can sort of parse that together. So it's just I'm just another part of we're just a group, and we each contribute to the process.
Which is really great because there's so many pieces to publishing.
Yeah.
There's the writing, the revising, and
Right.
then there's the submitting, and there's the working.
Well,
with
and
the editorial.
that's I often am also counseling patients and being as realistic as I can be, whether individually or I do a group conversation also. I really counsel them about how long the process takes, and not to rush it, and not to try to lean on it too hard to push it faster than it wants to go, because that doesn't bring the best work. So that's often a very hard message, but I think people who are developing their craft need to reflect on that as well. That's important.
Yeah, and writing is a process, and this is one part of that journey.
And we both do, I think, we compliment people who choose to do this, because it's a real commitment they're making to themselves and to their craft. And I think it's pretty unbelievable. I know all the workshops are like this. This is the only one I know well. But what they get from coming here for a week it's quite extraordinary, the depth of what they receive by doing this.
Well, I have so much respect for them for just being able to open themselves up and be vulnerable. I mean, it's scary to present your work to people you don't know and ask for help with it. And I just always, I take as much from the participants, I think, that I give to them, you know. It's
Absolutely.
a learning experience
Absolutely.
for everyone.
And then it's fun for us to watch people who grow from
Right.
here, keeping track of them, and
Yeah.
it's really neat. Yeah. We'll see somebody pop up that they've sold a book. We go, yay!
Are there specific lectures throughout the week on areas of craft, or does that happen more in the one-on-one sessions?
Well, we have in the afternoon after our writing workshops, we have a little break, and then we'll come back for an afternoon conversation before dinner. And that, you know, maybe the first one will be kind of a overall, like, what's your revision plan for the week? Because some people come here and, you know, generate a lot of pages, and after they have figured out, you know, what their revision strategy is going to be, but other people need the time to just walk around and think, and, you know, to reassure everyone that both approaches are okay, because there's so much writing advice out there. You know, you have to do this, you have to write 2 pages a day, you have to revise this way, but I feel like every person's process is so individual. So just giving them tools that they can take with them, or, you know, ideas of how they might do it, but then also reassuring them that whatever approach they take is theirs. And so we have those afternoon conversations. And in addition to Debbie, like Debbie will lead one conversation, I'll lead one, Anne will lead one, Laura will lead one, but we have an agent, and for the past 10 years, it's been Tina Dubois at ICM, since she's my agent and Anne and Laura's agent. And then at the end of the week, an editor, Jordan Brown from Walden Pond Press and Balzer and Bray comes and gives a talk from the editor's side. So they get a kind of a even wider picture, you know, with Tina and Jordan coming.
And are students writing while they're here?
Yes. I mean, like I said, I think it depends. But people write, and they are also welcome to, you know, if they have a scene that they have changed and want feedback immediately on whether it's working, you know, they can email pages to me, they can email pages to Laura Ann or Debbie, and we will, you know, give them feedback right away. So people are writing, are, you know, starting the process of revisioning their work while they're here.
Can you is there one example in your head of like a piece of advice you gave to somebody this week that was like a craft tip?
I have one.
Oh, okay.
I have one that I'm really happy about it. I think it worked for the participant. She is wanting to get closer to her character, and I often talk to them about multimodalities, about getting away from the page, and certainly getting away from the hunk of work that you've made. If you need to step back and think about things. And this particular person really loves taking walks here. And I said, do you ever take photographs when you take walks? And she said, yeah, I guess so. And I said, well, how about if you take a walk, pretend you're taking a walk with your character, and let your character hold the camera, and let your character take pictures of things that she would like to think about later. And she just went, whoa. She got excited.
That's great.
Yeah, I felt happy about that, because it's a simple way, it's a refreshing way to do it. And so I felt good about that one.
I like it.
It seemed to work for her.
And I mean, one of the exercises that Laura did in our afternoon conversations was trying to, since a novel is such a big, you know, unwieldy thing, try to think about it in terms of if you were compressing it into a picture book. So one of the exercises was that we had participants take their novel and write it in a picture book form so they could kind of see the whole arc at once. And everybody had a really good time. You know, they had a lot of fun with that, but they also discovered, you know, like someone's writing a picture book and one character that had seemed important in the novel like isn't there in this description. So going back and thinking, now wait a second, is that character really important, or is that this other relationship over here that's really the heart of this book? So
Oh wow.
yeah. And another woman that we had who, you know, people are different kinds of writers. So you have drafters who just love to write pages and love first drafts, and people who hate first drafts and love revision, and I'm more on the revision side. I love that. And the one woman who came who was very much more of a drafter, and revision scared her so much. And at one point I was talking about how I was nervous to get, you know, editorial notes back from my letter, and she's like, wait, you mean you don't love it all the time? And I'm like, no, just because you are one way doesn't mean it's not like incredibly hard still. And she's like, wow, I thought, if loving revision means you just sit down every day and like you're just smoothly going through it. And that is not the case.
Still hurts.
Yeah, it still hurts.
So you like revision. Do you have
Yes.
a specific revision process you go through with every piece, or does it?
I mean, I feel like it's different for every book, and also because I write novels in verse, it's a little bit different. I mean, I'm trying to make each page into a poem or something that could stand alone as best it could, which it can never completely because you have to, string them together into a narrative. But a lot of times I'm trying to kind of bead a necklace and make sure each bead is, as beautiful as I can make it, and then I'll go and try to string them together.
Okay. So, Deb, what are you working on in the next couple of months? Any exciting projects that you...
I'm personally working on a historical piece myself about a relative's immigration to the United States as a response to what's going on today with immigration, just my own personal response. That's something I'm doing on my own. At work, we've got movies coming out. I'm working on some movies that are coming out in the next few months, and doing a partnership with the National Wildlife Federation in partnership with this movie to create some programs to get families to do stuff outdoors in nature.
Oh, wonderful.
And what else am I doing? I also... in the summer and in the winter, I spend some time at Hamline University's low residency MFA program, where Anne and Laura are also on the faculty, and Christine is a graduate of the program. And I do a mentorship stint in those programs as well. So that's my work flows back and forth between working with, helping to develop new writers, working on books. Right now, I have about 12 books I've got to read that are unpublished to analyze for publication, so that's going on all the time, and there's a lot of different things going on.
Mm-hmm. All related to story.
All about live in the land of story. That's my motto. Live in the land of story.
I like that.
Yeah.
You should get bumper stickers.
I just repeat it and I say it to other people. Yeah.
And Christine, what are you working on right now?
Well, after I leave here, I have to just put my head down and finish this novel in verse that I'm working on that has been a long journey to get here. And I think, I have about a month more work to do after 3-4 years of trying to get it to come together. So it feels really good and the process with this book is it started out as a novel in prose, and it had a lot of different components in it, but in the journey, it has changed markedly into something that's now in verse and something that's much more focused, with a lot of some of these wild plot elements like stripped away. So my process with this book was kind of clearing away the stuff that didn't matter and figuring out what the heart of the book was. So I think I'm going to be in the exact same place as the students when I leave here, trying to figure out how to revise as, efficiently, and a process that works for me as best I can to meet this deadline at the end of June.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have your work cut out for you.
I do.
Wow. Well, thank you both. Let me see here. One of the things we talk a lot about at the Highlights Foundation is community and building that community, and you referred to that a little bit. I wonder if, just by saying the word community around writing, what is your community around writing at home?
I've moved around a lot in the past 10 years, from the Midwest to currently I live in Poughkeepsie in the Hudson Valley. And, I think it's hard to find your people right away. And I have gradually done that. But people from here, from Highlights, are also part of my community. In fact, one of my good writing friends now in Poughkeepsie is somebody that I met because our daughters went to the same dance camp, and then I found out she was a writer and encouraged her to come here, and then she became, one of our workshop attendees, and then she came back for another one, and then she got an agent, and then she sold her book, and so that's a friendship now that I have, out in the real world that has a lot to do with us connecting here. So, it's just so hard to pinpoint all the different connections because there's just so
Well, I think there's a cohort of
intricate.
us that we are mutually, collectively committed not only to children's books but to children and children's lives, and I think that just connects us. So there are many people who are on the faculty here that we have relationships with also. You've got fantastic faculty, and I consider them community, even though I'm not in the same place. I consider Christine and Ann and Laura to be part of my community, even though we only gather a few times a year. But we're watching each other and we're helping each other and we're listening for each other all the time. And I think that's a great thing about our time, that you can be well connected with people even if you're not in the same place all the time. But particularly if you're living a life of the mind together, if you're sharing a life of the mind, because it's pretty easy to share the thing you're thinking about and hear back about it, even if you're not right next to each other.
It's great to have online communities, which are such a major resource of support these days, but it is great to come here and connect in the real world, in real time with people.
And that's one thing we hear, even from unworkshoppers who come for their own writing time, that opportunity to connect with somebody unbeknownst to them over a meal and realize that passion. We're all talking about story for children and young audiences.
I think what you've built here, I think we would all agree, is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
You've really created a very important place for our generation of creators.
It's
really
fantastic.
important. Yeah.
It feels really great when we've got creators coming and feeling that vibe of we're part of a community and we're sharing with each other.
You're fostering an environment that's really helping all of us.
And people feel so cherished and well cared for when they come here. Always the first thing people say is the food. You have to come for the food, which, seems like a superficial thing, but it's not. Like, to have people nourished, mentally and physically and spiritually, and you guys are so careful of taking everyone's dietary needs into account when you're making the meals, and I think people really appreciate that all aspects of their well-being are taken into consideration when they come here.
And hopefully that allows then your creative juices, your creativity to open up. That's our secret sauce. If we can do the cooking and the cleaning and take you away from your day-to-day, you get a chance to unlock your mind.
It's part of the welcome.
Further.
You feel so welcome. Everybody here feels so welcome. And, all the people who work here, we know them from year to year. Some of them, and there's a conversation that goes on with them from year to year. Your presence here, it's you feel very, very, very welcomed.
Well, thank you, Deb and Christine, for joining us on Into the Words here at the Highlights Foundation Retreat Center. We are dedicated to continuing our 35-year history of providing the space, the conversations, and the nurturing that goes into making great stories for kids. And thank you for what you do to support us, the Highlights Foundation, but more importantly, what you're doing to support children and that belief that children are the world's most important people.
Thanks.
Thanks.